When I first looked at the program for this retreat, I was very surprised because HP put me in for 1 hour on Savitri. And I had never spoken to a group before on Savitri. I usually leave that to those few people who have deeper insights. But after 54 years of reading Savitri, as I mentioned, 10 years in Oroville at the Matri Mandir, and preparing the Lexicon of an Infinite Mind, which is a dictionary of words and terms in Savitri, on which I spent 2 years with Mary Helen, my wife, before she passed away of cancer. And then I ran into a problem with having it printed. I had completed the entire manuscript. And I had purchased for $400 the Oxford English Dictionary on DVD, as well as the concise dictionary that was in very fine print in 2 volumes. So I wrote to Oxford Dictionary asking permission to use their definitions. And they wrote back and asked how many definitions, and I said about 3,000. And he said, "Oh, that would be a lot." He said, "And we charge £50 per definition." Where was I going to find that money? So I had to redo the entire work, take out all the Oxford definitions, and go to the free sources on the internet. And there are many, Webster and Random House, and it was wonderful, dictionary.com, but it took a long time. So a year ago it was finally published. Lexicon of an Infinite Mind. And then the supplement to the Lexicon, well, let me go through it first. The Lexicon of an Infinite Mind is all the definitions given by Sri Aurobindo and Mother to words and phrases in Savitri. And then the second tier is from the dictionary. The supplement is the answers given by disciples over many years. Purani, Nolini, to whom we asked many questions, and he graciously sat and answered everything, and we recorded them. And when we finally left Oroville in 81, because there were a lot of problems, they confiscated my camera and all the things and used erased Nolini's answers. We also had many answers from Madhav Pandit, from Alokwai, and others. Jumur especially answered many of the difficult phrases and terms. So that has just been published, the supplement to the Lexicon. It was a way of immersing ourselves in Savitri day to day, often 6 to 10 hours a day. And we went through the book 8 times while Mary Helen was alive, from cover to cover. Tonight, I'm going to take a journey with you into Canto 2, the issue. This is the big issue. we learned that Satyavan was going to die on this day, because Savitri takes place in one day. The whole of Savitri takes place in one day. So now we have the knowledge that Satyavan is going to die. And we see Savitri in the issue, and she is withdrawn. I will read it piece by piece, and then at the end I'll read the entire passage. A while, withdrawn in secret fields of thought, her mind moved in a many-imaged past that lived again and saw its end approach. Now these secret fields of thought, her mind is moving in this past that has many images. Obviously, if we look back, we also see so many remembrances. And the past lives again and sees its end approach. And dying, it lived imperishably in her. Transient and vanishing from transient eyes, invisible, a fateful ghost of self, it bore the future on its phantom breast. These lines in Savitri, these mantric lines, if possible, read Savitri out loud, always, so that the mantra sounds in the inner being. Even if it's one line or two, you can recite it throughout the day. Along the fleeting events' far backward trail, regressed the stream of the insistent hours, and on the bank of the mysterious flood, peopled with well-loved forms now seen no more, and the subtle images of things that were, her witness spirit stood reviewing time. So this stream of insistent hours that we all face every day regresses. And on this bank of the mysterious flood, there are well-loved forms. It's peopled. He uses the word peopled with well-loved forms, now seen no more, and the subtle images of things that were. Her witness spirit stood reviewing time. Now Sri Aurobindo takes us into Savitri's experience. All that she once had hoped and dreamed and been flew past her, eagle-winged, through memory's skies. All that she once had hoped and dreamed and even been flew past her, eagle-winged, through memory's skies, as in a many-hued, flaming inner dawn. Her life's broad highways and its sweet bypaths lay mapped to her sun-clear recording view. And what does she see? From the bright country of her childhood's days and the blue mountains of her soaring youth and the paradise groves and peacock wings of love, to joy, clutched under the silent shadow of doom, in a last turn where heaven raced with hell. So she sees even from her childhood. The whole thing is mapped to her view, sun-clear recording view. So she sees the bright country of her childhood's days. She sees, because her parents, king and queen. It's a beautiful area. The blue mountains of her soaring youth, and the paradise groves and peacock wings of love. Well, she's met Satyavan. He completes her to joy. Yes, there was such joy when they met. Clutched under the silent shadow of doom. He's predicted to die. In a last turn where heaven raced with hell. 12 passionate months led in a day of fate. So Sri Aurobindo here sets the scene for us. And now he says something that applies to many, not just Savitri. An absolute supernatural darkness falls on man sometimes when he draws near to God. Now that's an enjambed line. And an enjambed line means that the completion of the thought is carried over into the next line. So it's an absolute supernatural darkness falls on man. So here are the two lines. An absolute supernatural darkness falls on man sometimes when he draws near to God. Amal Kiran, K.D. Setna, named Amal Kiran by Sri Aurobindo, told me that there always is a brief pause from line to line, but even with an enjambed line, he said, there has to be a brief pause. So we don't just roll one line into another. An hour arrives when fail all nature's means. Now, this is not the 1954 and earlier editions, because they changed the word. An hour comes when fail all nature's means. It's not an hour arrives, as they have put here. Listen to it if I say it slowly. An hour arrives. It's not beautiful at all. An hour comes. We have these things. Who is this that comes? The bride. Or he comes into our darker parts, and curtained by the darkness does his work. Another two lines from Savitri. An all-knowing guest and guide. So it's an hour comes when fail all nature's means, forced out from the protecting ignorance and flung back on his naked primal need, he at length must cast from him his surface soul and be the ungarbed entity within. Now, look at these lines. Sri Aurobindo uses powerful words here. You can't read this like you would read some lines in a book. When fail and flung, forced, three F's right there. An hour comes when fail all nature's means, forced out from the protecting ignorance and flung back on his naked primal need. He at length must cast from him his surface soul and be the ungarbed entity within. Now, the protecting ignorance. What's our cliche? Ignorance is bliss. Yeah, ignorance is bliss. We don't know it? No problem. We don't want to know. But he's forced out from that protecting ignorance, and he's flung back on his naked primal need, and he has to cast from him that surface soul and be the ungarbed entity within. And then what does he say? That hour had fallen now on Savitri. A point she had reached where life must be in vain, or in her unborn element awake, her will must cancel her body's destiny. Whoa. For only the unborn spirit's timeless power can lift the yoke imposed by birth in time. Only the self, capital S, that builds this figure of self can raise the fixed interminable line that joins these changing names, these numberless lives, these new oblivious personalities, and keeps still lurking in our conscious acts the trail of old forgotten thoughts and deeds. Disown the legacy of our buried selves, the burdensome airship to our vanished forms, accepted blindly by the body and soul. Her will, Savitri's will, must cancel her body's destiny. Now, there are two lines in Savitri that tell us that both Mother and Sri Aurobindo are self-born. They choose to come here amongst us. A conscious frame was here, a self-born force. Only the unborn spirit's timeless power can lift the yoke imposed by taking birth in time. Only the self, capital S, that builds this figure of self can raise the fixed interminable line that joins these changing names, these numberless lives, these new oblivious personalities. And still there's lurking in our conscious acts this whole trail of old forgotten thoughts and deeds. We have to disown the legacy of our buried selves, this burdensome airship to our vanished forms that are accepted blindly by us, by the body and soul. And then he says, an episode in an unremembered tale, its beginning lost, its motive and plot concealed, a once living story has prepared and made our present fate child of past energies. Whoa. The fixity of the cosmic sequences, the fixity of the cosmic sequences, fastened with hidden, inevitable links, she must disrupt, dislodge by her soul's force her past, a block on the immortal's road, make a raised ground, and shape anew her fate. Now, this is interesting because we just had a few lines back can raise the fixed interminable line. And now Sri Aurobindo uses the word again. Make a raised ground and shape anew her fate. You know these days when they implode buildings, how the building just goes in on itself, take a bulldozer and wipe it away. Make a raised ground, clean ground. Incredible. She has to do this. But she can do it. She's Savitri. And we can do it because we have the Divine Mother's help at every moment. She once wrote to me, "The love and blessings are always and everywhere with you both." And when Mary Helen was soon to pass away, I had forgotten my copy of Savitri downstairs. She could no longer walk on the stairs, down the stairs. And she says, "My copy is over there." And I picked it up, opened it just randomly, and there was Mother's note to her. "Fear not, I am with you." So we see in this issue, and we're only talking about 40 lines or so, an amazing journey. She sees the whole past. She knows that she's had this moment of joy, paradise groves, and peacock wings of love. But that joy is clutched under the silent shadow of doom. And much later on, she's ready to give it all up. And the Lord comes to her and he says, "What shall thy soul say when it sees that the work for which you came was left undone?" We can never give up. We can, whatever we have to go through, never give up. We have the Divine Mother present with us, present right now. This I can tell you. This you can feel. And she is there every moment. The love and blessings are everywhere and always and everywhere with you. So now we're going to move to another section in the same canto, and I will talk to you a little bit about this because this was one of the times when Amal Kiran wrote to Sri Aurobindo and asked him if this passage wasn't the ne plus ultra of over-mental poetry. And Sri Aurobindo, in his humble way, says that the touch of the overmind is there. And it's the first major description we have of Savitri. And it is such a beautiful description. So we'll begin with let's see here. So she's in Shalwa Woods right now with Satyavan. He goes out, to cut firewood. His mother and father are there. And Savitri, who never spared cleaning the house or doing anything the parents wanted, on this one day she says, "Can I go out with him?" And she's given permission because she knows he's going to die. Around her were the austere, sky-pointing hills, and the green, murmurous, broad, deep-thoughted woods muttered incessantly their muffled spell. Look at this. Murmurous, muttered, muffled. A dense, magnificent, colored, self-wrapped life, draped in the leaves' vivid emerald monotone. Murmurous, muttered, muffled, magnificent, monotone. Incredible. Around her were the austere, sky-pointing hills, and the green, murmurous, broad, deep-thoughted woods muttered incessantly their muffled spell. In the woods, sound is always going on. The leaves are rustling, the grasses. A dense, magnificent, colored, self-wrapped life draped in the leaves' vivid emerald monotone and set with checkered sunbeams and blithe flowers, immured her destiny's secluded scene. So he sets the scene for us. There had she grown to the stature of her spirit. The genius, Sri Aurobindo uses this often, the genius of titanic silences, steeping her soul in its wide loneliness, had shown to her self's bare reality and mated her with her environment. You know, it's a very lonely place, you could say. It's in the forest someplace, a few clearings, and just the father and mother and her and Satyavan. The genius of titanic silences, steeping her soul in its wide loneliness, had shown to her self's bare reality and mated her with her environment, for hers, two together. If you look in the dictionary, they'll highlight it as a mistake. Had shown to her self's bare reality and mated her with her environment. Its solitude greatened her human hours with a background of the eternal and unique. A force of spare, direct necessity reduced the heavy framework of man's days and his overburdening mass of outward needs to a first thin strip of simple animal wants, and the mighty wildness of the primitive earth, and the brooding multitude of patient trees, and the musing sapphire leisure of the sky, and the solemn weight of the slowly passing months, had left in her deep room for thought and God. There was her drama's radiant prologue lived. Prologue. He's not past yet. A spot for the eternal's tread on earth, set in the cloistral yearning of the woods and watched by the aspiration of the peaks, appeared through an aureate opening in time where stillness listening felt the unspoken word, and the hours forgot to pass towards grief and change. We see the scene, we can see everything. The sky, the patient trees, the primitive earth, all these outward needs done away with, very simple sylvan life. His father, of course, is blind, Jumatsana. There was her drama's radiant prologue lived. Now, here, with the suddenness divine advents have, repeating the marvel of the first descent, changing to rapture the dull earthly round, love came to her, hiding the shadow, death. Now this is about love. Well might he find in her his perfect shrine. Since first the earth beings heavenward growth began, through all the long ordeal of the race, never a rarer creature bore his shaft, that burning test of the Godhead in our parts, a lightning from the heights on our abyss. All in her pointed to a nobler kind, near to earth's wideness, intimate with heaven, exalted and swift, her young, large-visioned spirit, voyaging through worlds of splendor and of calm, overflew the ways of thought to unborn things. Ardent was her self-poised, unstumbling will, her mind a sea of white sincerity, passionate in flow, had not one turbid wave. And now begins that passage where Sri Aurobindo gives us the first description of Savitri. And it is so beautiful that I'm not going to comment. We know that love has come to her. And we know that he's hiding the shadow, death. But all of that now is over here. And Sri Aurobindo gives us this vision, this first vision of Savitri, Divine Mother. As in a mystic and dynamic dance, a priestess of immaculate ecstasies, inspired and ruled from truth's revealing vault, moves in some prophet cavern of the gods, a heart of silence in the hands of joy, inhabited with rich creative beats, a body like a parable of dawn that seemed a niche for veiled divinity, or golden temple door to things beyond. Immortal rhythms swayed in her time-born steps. Her look, her smile awoke celestial sense even in earth stuff, and their intense delight poured a supernal beauty on men's lives. A wide self-giving was her native act. a magnanimity as of sea or sky, enveloped with its greatness all who came, and gave a sense as of a greatened world. Her kindly care was a sweet, temperate sun. Her high passion, a blue heaven's equipoise. As might a soul fly like a hunted bird, escaping with tired wings from a world of storm, and a quiet reach like a remembered breast. In a haven of safety and splendid soft repose, one could drink life back in streams of honey fire, recover the lost habit of happiness, feel her bright nature's glorious ambience, and preen joy in her warmth and colors rule. A deep of compassion, a hushed sanctuary, her inward help unbarred a gate in heaven. Love in her was wider than the universe. The whole world could take refuge in her single heart. The great unsatisfied Godhead here could dwell, vacant of the dwarf self's imprisoned air. Her mood could harbor his sublimer breath, spiritual, that can make all things divine. For even her gulfs were secrecies of light. At once she was the stillness and the word, a continent of self-diffusing peace, an ocean of untrembling virgin fire. The strength, the silence of the gods were hers. In her, he found a vastness like his own. His high, warm, subtle ether he refound and moved in her as in his natural home. In her, he met his own eternity. And that's the end of the passage. What an extraordinary passage. You know, how do we make a raised ground? The past is so much with all of us. We think of our mistakes of the past, our little successes of the past, and we dwell on them. We dwell on a loved one's passing. We dwell on difficulties of life when someone falls ill, child, mother, whatever. And you know what Mother says in her prayers and meditation? She says, at every moment we must shake off the past like fading dust, that it may not soil the virgin path, which at every moment also is opening before us. And just a little bit on 6 lines from Savitri. Now, Savitri has brought Satyavan back to earth. She has faced imperious death and defeated him. He says to her so many things, and I'll read a couple of passages tomorrow in our morning Om choir. He was eaten by light. At the end, he is eaten by light, and she defeats him, brings Satyavan back to earth. And he says to the people, "Behold, at noon, leaving this house of clay, I wandered in far-off eternities, yet still, a captive in her golden hands, I tread your little hillock called green earth, and in the moments of your transient sun, live glad among the busy works of men." Contemplate for a moment this wondrous reply in 6 lines of Satyavan to his father's gentle scolding of Savitri. At noon, leaving this house of clay. For in the epic, his death in the forest takes place at noon. Not a departure of an early morning soul, or one who leaves enfolded in the dark rooms of night, but at a time when the sun is at its most brilliant, showering the earth with light. Satyavan, as Sri Aurobindo writes, is the soul carrying the truth of being within itself, but descended into the grip of death and ignorance. Descended into the grip of death and ignorance. The divine realized soul does not become ignorance, but descends into death, and then is saved by Savitri, the Divine Mother. After leaving his body, this house of clay, and wandering in far-off eternities, all the while a captive in Savitri's golden hands, he returns and replies to his father, "I tread your little hillock called green earth." For the soul released from the grip of death and ignorance, after traveling in far-off eternities, where we cannot even hazard a guess, returning to earth a joyous captive of the Divine Mother, the earth appears to be nothing more than a green hillock. And yet, Satyavan lives glad in the moments of a sun that is transient, among the busy works of men. As Sri Aurobindo once wrote to Dilip Kumar Roy, I paraphrase, "The earth is a conscious being, and the world is only the form it takes to manifest." Predating the Gaia theory by 30-some years. This statement of the avatar, far surpassing the Gaia theory in its infinite scope, promises an earth returned to beauty, to manifest, and an inconceivable perfection. I once wrote to Mother a question about what would happen to plants and flowers in the new creation. Her reply filled me with joy and gratitude, for she said that the flowers would be amongst the first to change, be transformed, because their entire life is an aspiration for light. Imagine the beauty to come with flowers brilliant with the divine light, colors such as never seen before, fragrances that can transform suffering and sorrow into a life free of pain and filled with joy. This little hillock, divinely ordained for the manifestation of the life divine, must be nourished, protected, felt and ultimately realized as a conscious being, and through the sincerity, prayer, and efforts of souls attuned to her infinite possibility of perfection, saved from the destruction and devastation man has wreaked upon her. Oh.